Good evening, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good night, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, the following is a collection of news from Patriots. Let's get into the news this late Monday night. And it looks like the deep state is already working overtime to eliminate Kari Lake before the election is even started. That's right. They've already tried to do a white powder mail into Kari Lake, hoping that she would have opened the envelope filled white powder, whatever the white powder was, and the FBI was called to come investigate. Why would you call the FBI? They're probably the ones who probably sent it. These people hate Kari Lake, and that's obviously resonating in the swamp right now. The hate for Kari Lake, the amount of money that's been poured into Arizona to try to defeat Kari Lake, and I don't think it's going to work. I think Kari Lake is going to pull through in that election in Arizona and on Tuesday. I think the momentum is all behind Kari Lake, and I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised. It's going to be a fantastic time. Hopefully you guys will come and join us. So let's kind of dive into this. Coming to us from the Post Millennial. Here we go. It says here, FBI investigating suspicious powder mailed to Kari Lake's office. The FBI and local police are investigating suspicious packages that arrived to the Republican Arizona gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake's Phoenix campaign offices on Saturday, containing a mysterious white powder and hateful messages. That's right. They are getting desperate, my friends. The FBI and local police are investigating the suspicious package that arrived at her campaign office, according to Daily Mail. Law enforcement officials were present at the office from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. the next morning after Kari Lake's team reported what they believed to be a terrorist attack, trying to intimidate Kari and her campaign staff. A source familiar with the Republican campaign told Daily Mail that one of Kari's staffers opened up the envelope that had a suspicious white powder in it, and had a letter in there with a bunch of vulgarities and rantings and ravings about Kari. The employee then noted the second package. That was exactly like the first one she had opened. And she had reported it. The source claimed your report was responded by a hazmat team and bomb squad, as well as the FBI, who took the powder for analysis. And also, just an update from where I've read on Twitter, that staffer is now in the hospital. So prayers are up for her, as she is in there related to this terrorist attack, or deep state plan to foil Kari Lake. We'll see how this plays out. It reminds me a lot of how Democrats are working overtime in order to try to derail many of these elections. Heading Tuesday. So do me a favor. If you have not voted yet, make sure you go on election day, vote in person, take a friend, take a family member, and make sure you vote, get your voice heard. And let's get these candidates over the finish line. And let's take our country back through the process of electing our officials. And this is some big news. 2 weeks ago, Joe Biden hosted a human and named to Dylan Mulvaney to the White House. Mulvaney is a TikTok star and former actor who starred in Book of Mormon. Nobody had heard of any of this until about March 2020, when Dylan Mulvaney decided that he was actually a woman. Now he has about 8 million followers on TikTok, was featured by Forbes at their Power Women's Summit, and has a series of contracts with makeup companies, including ads deals with Serif, Max Neutrogena, and Kate Spade. That's right, men are so unbelievable at being women, that one can say he's a woman and become one of the most influential women in America in just 6 months of wearing dresses and ironing his hair. The patriarchy always wins, gang. So this fellow Mulvaney, he began to document his attempt to become a woman in a series that he dubbed Days of Girlhood. Day 1, Fisher Mulvaney, explaining that he had cried 3 times, had told someone he was fine when he wasn't, and had ordered clothes that had cost too much money. All are all hallmarks of being a girl. According to him, it's not sexist at all, if he says it. That's just what being a woman is, right? Crying too much and fitting your friends and spending too much money on clothes, that says what women do. See, if I say that, that's an ugly stereotype about women. But if I say I'm a woman, that I have the authority to speak about these ugly stereotypes and pretend that they actually apply. Other days featured Mulvaney, who is the most female of all females, jabbering about the size of his nipples, which had been changed by estrogen shots. Spoiler alert, they are allegedly, according to him, pepperoni-sized. I wish I were kidding, I am not. And also talking about normalizing his crotch bulge in tight pleather shorts. Because as we all know, from all of our professors, some women have penises, and we all must acknowledge this simple fact. It's a lot of heroism, not all heroes talk so much. So naturally, Joe Biden, brought Mulvaney to the White House to interview him. Biden doesn't do interviews with actual members of the media who might ask him questions, forcing him to use what is left of his brain. But he does do interviews with men who believe they are women. So Mulvaney donned a trans-colored pantsuit. I'm not kidding you, and sat across from the president, and he asked the president, quote, "Do you think states should have the right to ban gender-affirming healthcare?" Now, for those who don't know, gender-affirming healthcare is a euphemistic misnomer for a series of medical interventions ranging from social transition, where everybody pretends they're a member of the sex that you claim membership to cross sex hormones, which would be shooting kids or boys full of estrogen or girls with testosterone, to mutilation and sterilization surgically ranging from breast removals and phalloplasty. Using girls to vaginoplasty use in boys. So Joe Biden responded to this question, quote, "I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that as a moral question. And as a legal question, I think it is just wrong. It is morally wrong to prevent minors from getting these sorts of quote-unquote treatments." So assume for a second that the President of the United States, his brain is not complete applesauce at this point. So we have to ask the question, how did one of the two major parties in the United States, the entirety of the legacy media, all of academia, and nearly all corporate America, come to believe that transiting the children isn't just something that some people could do it as a moral necessity, then an attempt to stop it is some sort of moral wrong? Well, the transition of the kids has become the latest symptom of a far deeper and more profound evil in Western civilization. That evil is the broad redefinition of Western identity as a whole around subjective sexual feeling. See, traditional morality sees identity in a different way. Traditionally, moral people see identity as a symbiotic relationship between the individual and society, or a mix of biology and the institutions that shape us. Identity lives between those two things. This is why the goal of parenting is to civilize your child. Your child is a bag of emotions. I have 3 of them. They are bags of biological-driven emotions, and they don't have what we're calling Hebrew cycle. They don't have common sense. They have not been civilized, and your job is to get them used to the institutions and civilizations they can interact well with the world. Philosopher Carl Trueman at the University of Utah writes, "It is in communal activities that individuals find their true selves. The true self in traditional cultures is therefore something that is given and learned, not something the individual creates for himself." Today, Western morality has utterly discarded this idea. Who we are is not a question of society or institutions or roles. Instead, who we are is a question of internal feeling alone. Any societal force, any institution that crimps how we feel is bad, oppressive, and ought to be destroyed. When institutions are in positions and therefore they must be destroyed, as Froman explains the intuitive moral structure of our modern social imaginary prioritizes victimhood, sees selfhood in psychological terms regarding traditional sexual codes as oppressive and life-denying, and places a premium on the individual's right to define his or her own existence. And the refusal by any individual to recognize an identity society at large recognizes as legitimate as a moral offense, not simply a matter of indifference. You're expected to celebrate everybody's identity, because their identity is how they feel. Now, this redefinition of identity is really irrational, because it presumes that who you are is your passions, and that true happiness is to be found in the evisceration of all the institutions that allow you to live successfully in the world. It has a long history. Percy Shelley, husband of Mary Shelley and dissolute poet, wrote, quote, "In fact, religion and morality as they now stand, compose a practical code of misery and servitude. The genius of human happiness must tear every leaf from the cursing book of God. Your man can read the inscription on his heart." This particular belief system that sexual passions are the root of who we are, it's not really progressive in any sense, doesn't progress humanity. Instead, it's a call to return to the animal. A far more accurate ideological label, and when I started to use, is transgressive. This philosophy of identity revolves around a program of norm violation, of destroying boundaries and rules and social acceptability, all in the name of liberating the passions. Now, transgressivism does result in deep unhappiness, because after all, we are far more than just whatever we feel like sexually. We are embedded beings. We are embedded in time. We are embedded in society. We are embedded into our families. If you remove all of those connections, that leaves people completely aimless. What's more, if you link sexual desires with identity, that's the only part of you that matters. It dispenses with the other aspects of invalid individuality that comprise most of who we are. Freedom of action, reason, our sympathies with other people. If all you are is a Freudian sex impulse, then you really aren't a person, you're just a Freudian sex impulse. We are more than that. But transgressivism rejects all of that. Transgressivism treats both behavior and desire as immutable characteristics, like race or sex, thus removing freedom and responsibility. So what exactly changed? How did we get to this point where we discarded the traditional view of what identity was? Right, your interaction with the world, your movements into roles that make you a better and more fulfilled human being? How did we discard that in favor of this newfangled transgressive identity? Well, the truth is that historically speaking, the new version of identity would have failed because it runs directly contrary to reality. Men who believe they are women, this would be laughed at in most of the world today, let alone throughout history. Men and women who choose alternative lifestyles directed at sexual pleasure rather than reproduction, or relationships or roles. Human beings who find themselves primarily in terms of sexual desires, all of this would have failed historically speaking, but over the course of the 20th century, traditional morality was largely obliterated for three specific reasons. First, religious practice in the West markedly declined. Religion has been for all of recorded history societal glue. As religion declines, so today's the moral and social immune system of a society. Religion allows us a shared moral system, principles that create a backdrop of philosophical homogeneity that allow for the weaving of a social fabric. Second, the advance of science and welfare state lured the West into a false sense of security, a sense that the link between action and consequence had been completely severed. Birth control meant that sex was now completely disconnected from the results of sex for literally all of mammalian history. And then welfare meant that you didn't actually have to pay the consequences of your own action, all of which resulted in incentivization of exactly the sorts of behavior that heretofore had been disincentivized by reality. Third, thanks to the decline in religious practice, and the events of birth control and welfarism, we entered a realm of what I would call pseudo-rationalism. This is a philosophy that suggests that all human behaviors and social rules have to be justified in some way tabula rasa via secular humanism. So you can't just hear a bad idea like men can be women and just laugh at that and say, that's silly. There's no reason to believe that. Instead, you're gonna have to construct an argument as to why men cannot be women. And if you fail to construct this argument, we have to change society overnight. Now, the reality is the way that most of us interact with the world is that we receive wisdom from our parents, from the society around us. This is a form of data. Thomas Dole has pointed this out. If wisdom has been tested over the course of thousands of years, and found to be durable, discarding that for no apparent reason would be an incredibly stupid thing to do. But we as a society have decided that it's no longer okay to simply point to tradition or point to traditional wisdom. Instead, we have to come up with some sort of logic as to why that works. It shifts the burden of proof modern society away from the people who wish to tear down these institutions and onto the people who wish to defend these institutions. The result of this is that now in the West, there are really only a couple of values that remain. Jonathan Haidt, the sociologist, points this out. He says there are a couple of values that are left: harm and fairness. Right? Are you harming somebody? And is it fair? These are the only two things that seem to matter to the modern individual. Other values that conservatives have traditionally prized, like loyalty for us, or respect for authority, are purity. These have all been discarded. Haidt writes in great book you should read called The Righteous Mind. Westerners will now defend pretty much anything up to and including the right of a man's buy a chicken at the supermarket and have sex with it. He says, quote, if you're an educated and politically liberal Westerner, you'll probably give another nuanced answer, one that acknowledges the man's right to do what he wants, as long as he doesn't hurt anyone. Here's the thing though, Jonathan Haidt doesn't actually go far enough. In our society, we no longer ask if it's okay for a man to go down to the supermarket, buy a frozen chicken and have sex with it. We don't ask if it's okay, we say that that's now an identity. And if you say that it's bad, there's something morally wrong with you. That being a chicken copy later is a form of who you are. And if anybody says differently, if anybody says that this is bad or wrong, this means that they are some sort of bigot. Well, if this is what transgressivism pushes, this idea that everything that has made human beings traditionally, that all of the things that make people feel embedded and whole and fulfilled, needs to be discarded. How exactly was this crammed down, not only inside, but especially on children, and why on children? Well, back in July of 2021, there was a video that was released by the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. The chorus has a mission. According to its website, we have all society's views toward LGBTQ people through our commitment to excellence. This commitment to excellence caused them to release a video. It was a song called A Message from the Gay Community, and the lyrics went something like this. Do you think that will corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked? Honey, justice, once you're correct, will convert your children happens bit by bit, quietly and suddenly, and you will barely notice it will convert your children, will make them tolerant and fair. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children. There's not a lot of question that transgressivism targets kids. They have to, because here's the thing. If you wish to construct a society that hates all the institutions, you have to start with a crowd of people who haven't been shaped and molded by the institutions. And all of the people in this room, you're all adults. This means that you've been shaped and molded by institutions. You may have some pre-existing notions of what right and wrong constitute, what's good and bad. But if you start with the kids, and you blow up the institutions for the kids, you can shape them in whatever direction you want. And the transgressors are not hiding the ball in this particular respect. They actually believe they're doing a favor to kids, they're liberating the kids. Because after all, if you get rid of all these institutions, kids can live more fulfilled, fluid, happy lives. The most obvious manifestation of this, which we've seen pretty much all over the United States, as Drag Queen Story Hour or family-friendly drag shows across the country. Why is this happening? Well, the answer is, again, it is promotion of transgressivism. Drag is by necessity and by definition transgressive. It's about violating rules. Targeting this message toward kids is seen apparently as a good thing. Because drag is a way of broadening minds or blurring boundaries. The Drag Queen Story Hour organization itself argues such events are necessary in order to allow kids to, quote, see people who defy rigid gender restrictions and imagine a world where everyone can be their authentic selves. And this is the mode of pure transgressivism. Your authentic self lies in your subjective sense of what you are, unshaped by any institutions. And we will show you a bunch of men twerking in front of you dressed as women in order to help you destroy those institutions. Now, in reality, all this stuff is incredibly dangerous for kids that require stability, kids require rules. Kids require institutions, kids require the teaching of traditional wisdom. Kids do not require men dressed in thongs working in their face. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. If you're up for it, I'm gonna get back to work.